Welcome to a review of Game 6 of the World Chess Championship. Magnus is playing with the white pieces and Jan is playing with the black pieces. This is using Chess.com's game review feature under their Diamond membership. So this was the longest game in World Chess Championship history. Let's go through the moves and see how it turned out. We'll try to go through pretty quickly, and if you want more in-depth, check out some of the other chess channels who will go into very great detail with this. So we have d4, first move by Magnus, knight f6, knight f3, d5, g3, e6, bishop d2, bishop e7, castles, so queen pawn opening pseudo Catalan variation. And it says that I played this game 90 times with a 43% win rate, 3 draws and 48% loss. The master games say that c4 produces a 41% chance to win for white, b3 30% chance, and knight b to d2 22% chance. So the next move was actually b3. We have c5, d captures c5, bishop captures d5, c4, d captures c4, queen c2, developing the queen, queen e7, developing the queen, knight b d2, knight c6, knight captures c4, b5, knight c e5, knight b4, attacks the queen, queen b2, bishop b7, they call it a great move, a3, knight c6, knight d3, bishop b6. So those bishops have a nice, bad arrow, a nice diagonal that they're looking at. See if we can get it that time. There we go. Bishop g5, rook f to d8, bishop captures f6, pawn captures f6. So it says that queen capture would have been better here, but that would have offered the queen trade right away. Rook a c1, knight d4, knight captures d4, bishop captures d4, rook a2, bishop captures g2, so trading off some bishops, king captures g2, queen b7 check, and we're only on move 21. King g1, so it shows the eval is even right now. Queen e4, queen c2, a5, rook fd1, king g7, rook d2, rook a c8, queen. So this is a moment in the game where there was the option to trade the queen for 2 rooks, and it was done. So Magnus played queen captures c8, rook captures c8, rook captures c8. So the game is still drawn right here on move 27. Queen d5, b4, a4, e3, bishop e5, h4, h5, king h2, bishop b2 is considered a blunder. It says queen b3 is the best. It ignores a way to threaten to win a piece, so that lines is as follow. So white would have had an advantage if they played queen b3 instead. Black would have been better off if they played queen b3 instead. Rook c5, great move. So now white has an advantage. Queen d6, inaccuracy. Queen d7 would have been better. But now rook d1 is considered a blunder. Missed opportunity to connect the rooks and attack the bishop. So here bishop captures is correct. Rook captures. Queen d7, great move. So Nepo has the advantage here based on the evaluation on move 34. Rook c5, e5. It wanted the bishop to capture. So it would have been bishop capture. And whether or not a trade would have happened if knight capture and queen captures rook. Rook c2 is a blunder, says that e4 is best, but queen d5 equalizes the game. It says that, let's see the line, it wanted, so this is what it thought would happen. This is what, if they captured the pawn, the line that it would show. So white is threatening. What is white threatening right here? This black has the advantage here, but this wasn't played. So back to the moves. We have rook c2 was a blunder, but queen d5 is a blunder. Now we're play rook d to d2, queen b3, rook a2, e4 is a blunder. Knight c5, so queen captures the pawn, and then knight captures is considered a blunder. It wanted rook d to c2. Queen d3, strongest move. Rook a c2 is the best. Bishop f8, knight c3, queen b5, knight d3, a3, knight f4, queen a5, knight a2, bishop b5, attacking the rook, queen d3, king h6, rook d1, queen a4, rook da1, bishop d6, king g1, queen b3. So we're move 49, still looking drawish. Knight e2, queen d3, knight d4, king h7, king h2, queen e4. So this is like when the computers play each other and the pieces are shuffling for better positioning. That bishop's protecting the pawn at the moment. Rook captures a3 is brilliant, giving back some material for a slight advantage. But first, queen captures h4 with check, and if you notice, pawn cannot capture because of the pin, so that's why it's the best move. So you have this check, you have king to g1, and now you have queen e4, rook a4, because black was not ready to trade the bishop for a rook. So bishop e5, knight e2, queen c2, rook 1 a2, queen b3, king g2. Sorry about that. Queen captures d5 with check, f3, queen d1, f4, queen c7, king f2, bishop b6, rook a1, queen b3, rook e4, king g7, rook e8, f5, pushing the pawn, rook a8, doubling up on the back rank, connecting the rooks, queen b4, rook a to c8, bishop a5, lining up the bishop and the queen, rook c1, protecting bishop b6, rook e5, queen b3, rook e8, queen d5, rook c8, doubling up on the back again, queen h1, rook c1, queen d5, rook b1, bishop a7. It says h4 is better in this position. So let's see what that line would show. That keeps it drawlish, pawn captures, and then attacking over. And this would still be a drawlish line. So instead, we had rook to a7 and then rook e7, bishop c5, rook e5, queen d3. Great move, but white still has the advantage. Bishop b7, queen c2, rook b5, bishop a7, rook a5, bishop b6, rook a b5, bishop a7, rook captures f5, so winning a pawn. Queen d3, I'm threatening e3, rook f7 check, makes a pass pawn. So this gives up the rook, but now there's no pawn back there to help with the blockade. Rook b7, king to g6, so rook gets the piece back, and so now we're left with Magnus has a knight, 3 pawns and a rook versus a queen and a pawn. We're at move 82. Queen d5, rook a6, consider inaccuracy. At least it evens the game out. Says knight g1 is better. The king backs up to h7, rook a1, king g6, knight d4, queen b7, rook a2, queen h1, rook a6 check, king f7, knight f3, queen b1, knight d6, king g7, rook d5, queen a2, rook d2, queen b1, rook e2, queen b6, queen c2, queen b1, attacking the rook, knight d4 protecting, queen h1. So Magnus is trying to get to the point where it can move. He can move his king up the board and start pushing the pawns. And Nepo's trying to get into a position where he can get a perpetual checks and to draw the game. Queen h1, rook c7 check, king f6, rook c6 check, king f7, knight f3, queen b1, knight g5 check, consider inaccuracy, says that knight d4 is better, but then the king e7 would have been better, but king g7 was played, knight e6 check, king f7, knight d4, queen h1, king c7 check, king f6, knight f3, queen b1, rook d7, queen b2 check, rook d2 blocking. So the concern is a potential 3-fold repetition. So Magnus needs to figure out a way to make progress. Queen b1, knight g2, queen b4, rook d1. It says rook d5 would have been better. So let's just check that out briefly. It says that it would have presented a bit of an advantage. Yeah, so, but that wasn't played. We had, yes. So we had rook d1 instead of rook d5. Queen b3, rook d6 check, queen g7, rook d4, queen b2 check, knight e2, queen b1, e4. So that pawn's push, no 50 move rule, and that prevents the threefold repetition. Queen h1, rook d7 check, king g8, rook d4, queen h2 check, king e3, h4, threatens to win material, g captures h4, first a queen check, king g2, queen captures h4, so now you have a rook, 2 pawns, and a knight versus a queen, connected past pawns, rook d3, king f8, rook f3, queen d8, king e3. So they were saying on chess.com that at a certain point this was a table-based draw, but Magnus was pushing for the win because obviously it makes sense to. So king e3, queen a5, king f2, queen a7 check, rook e3, queen d7 is a mistake, and you need it to keep the queen a bit more active according to those on chess.com. Knight g3, queen d2 check, king f3, so now the king is safe, queen d1, rook e2 is an inaccuracy, it says that moving the king back is better, queen b3 check, it says it was a mistake, king g2, rook b7 is a blunder because it puts itself on a bad diagonal, and so from this point it says it's a losing position. Rook d2 is a mistake. It says that rook c2 would have been better, so let's check that out. So in this position now, white is able to get his king more active, but that wasn't played. We had rook d2, queen b3, rook d5, king e7, rook e5 check, king f7, rook f5 check, king e8. Now another pawn move, e5, queen a2 check, king h3, queen e6 is a blunder, needed to stay behind the king, king h4, queen h6 check, knight h5, queen h7, e6, so the pawns are rolling up the board, queen g6 is good, but queen h7 would have been more resilient because the queen needed to get back behind to try to prevent and clean up. Rook f7, queen d8, and now it's just it's been completely winning for white. F5 defends the attacked piece. Queen g1 is an inaccuracy, leads to mate in 18, but h6 is still very losing. Knight g7, and then we had resign. So game 6 ended with Magnus winning game 6. So now they stand at 3.5 games to 2.5 games. This is the first game that was won in this chess championship, and I believe the past 5 years, because of classical, all the other games have been drawn. So the game ended with 94.5% accuracy for white and 90.8 for black. Now, granted, this game was so long and it got so tricky. So this is the least accurate game that they played, but I believe leading up to the crazy computer-like ending, both players played really well. So if you liked the video, give a like, subscribe to the channel. Bedtime Chess, appreciate you checking us out. And thank you. Have a wonderful day.